This message, "There are places in this world that do not appear on maps," was not recorded for everyone. Rooms that exist only when someone is meant to find them. Tonight, you found one. This is the Hoaxen Archive, a collection of moments history tried to forget, decisions that changed timelines, truths that refused to stay buried, and stories that waited for the right person to return to them. This message was not recorded for everyone. There are places in this world that do not appear on maps. Rooms that exist quietly between ordinary moments. Rooms most people pass every day without ever seeing. Not because they are hidden, because they are waiting for the right person to arrive at the right time. Tonight, you arrived. This is the Hoaxen Archive. It does not collect objects, it collects turning points, moments when something changes before anyone else notices. Moments when understanding begins before explanation follows. Moments when a life quietly shifts direction and never returns to what it was before. The archive records those moments, and once they are recorded, they cannot disappear. If you are hearing this now, something has already changed, not loudly, not dramatically, but permanently, because the archive does not open for curiosity. It does not open for coincidence. It opens when someone reaches a threshold they were always meant to cross. You did not search for this message, you were guided to it, and that means one thing. Somewhere in your story, a page has already turned, and once a page turns inside the archive, it never turns back. Tonight, the archive opened for you. There are places in this world that do not exist for everyone. The Hoaxen Museum is one of them. Most people pass its doors without ever noticing they were there. They walk the same streets, they cross the same intersections, they stand in the same light, and still they never see it. Because the museum does not open for ordinary curiosity, it opens when someone reaches a moment their life cannot return from. Sometimes that moment looks small, a realization you could not ignore, a pattern you suddenly understood, a decision you knew you could not undo, or a quiet certainty that something around you was no longer what it seemed. The museum opens when that certainty arrives, not before and never by accident. Sometimes that moment looks small, a realization you could not ignore. Inside these walls are records of people who stood exactly where you stand now. People who felt something shift before they knew what it meant. People who sensed their story was changing direction before anyone else noticed it. The archive remembers them all. Every one of them believed they had simply discovered something new. But later, they understood the truth. They had not discovered the archive. The archive had discovered them. Which raises a question most visitors do not ask soon enough. Why did it open for you tonight? Because it did. And when the archive opens, it is never the first sign. It is the confirmation. The archive had discovered them. My name is Doria Vex. You are not here because I called you, and you are not here because you were searching. You are here because something in your timeline reached a moment the archive could no longer ignore. I do not predict futures. I do not interpret coincidence, and I do not choose who arrives here. I record what has already begun. Most people believe change happens loudly. They expect signs, announcements, obvious turning points they can recognize immediately. But the archive does not respond to loud moments. It responds to true ones. Moments when someone understands something they cannot unknow. Moments when a question stops being a question and becomes recognition. Moments when silence begins to feel different than it did before. The archive records those moments. And when it does, it opens. Some visitors arrive here thinking they're looking for answers, but answers are not what the archive keeps. It keeps evidence. Evidence that something in your story has already started moving. Evidence that a pattern has shifted. Evidence that a decision, spoken or unspoken, has already changed what comes next, which means something important is happening around you now, even if no one else sees it yet. And once the archive begins recording a moment, that moment never disappears again. Every archive begins with a record, not a prediction, not a warning, a record, because nothing enters the archive until something has already changed. Most people believe their lives move forward one day at a time, quietly, predictably, in ways that feel familiar. But there are moments when something shifts beneath the surface before anyone can explain why. A realization appears without being invited. A pattern becomes impossible to ignore. A decision begins forming before it is spoken out loud. These moments leave traces, and the archive recognizes them immediately. This book does not open for curiosity. It does not open because someone is wondering what comes next. It opens when a direction has already begun to change, which means something in your life is no longer moving the way it was before, even if everything around you still looks the same. Most visitors notice this change before they understand it. A conversation that feels different, a silence that feels louder than it should, a situation that suddenly reveals itself for what it really is. These are not interruptions, they are signals that a page has already turned. And once a page turns inside the archive, it never turns back, which is why this one opened tonight, for you. Most people believe they understand themselves. They believe they know where they stand. They believe they recognize the shape of their own story. But understanding is not the same as recognition, and recognition is not the same as clarity. There are moments in every life when something familiar suddenly feels different, not because the world changed, because you did. A conversation you once accepted begins to feel incomplete. A pattern you once ignored becomes impossible to overlook. A silence you once trusted starts to sound like. There is a moment in every life when something begins opening before anyone understands where it leads. Not a door, not a decision, a passage. Passages do not ask permission. They appear when a story is already moving in a new direction. Most people do not recognize them at first. They believe they are still standing where they always stood, still thinking the same thoughts, still living the same patterns, still following the same path, but something underneath the surface has already changed. The archive recognizes passages immediately because passages leave traces. They change timing, they change attention, they change what someone begins noticing that they never noticed before. Sometimes the change is quiet, a realization that returns again and again. Sometimes the change is subtle, a feeling that something no longer belongs where it once did. And sometimes the change feels like certainty arriving without explanation. You are standing inside one of those passages now, even if no one around you can see it yet, even if nothing outward has changed yet, even if you have not said it out loud yet. The archive always knows. Most people believe passages lead somewhere distant, somewhere far ahead of them, somewhere they will recognize later. But that is not how passages work. They do not lead forward. They reveal what has already begun. Something in your story has already stepped through, which means something else cannot follow you anymore. And once a passage opens inside the archive, it never closes the same way twice. That is why you are seeing this now, because this moment is not where your story changes. It is where your story already changed. Every archive contains objects that were never meant to be preserved, not because they were dangerous, because they were unfinished. Most artifacts enter the archive after a story ends, after a decision is made, after a truth becomes visible, after a life changes direction permanently, but sometimes an artifact appears before the story is complete. And when that happens, the archive pays attention. There is something here tonight that does not belong with the others, something that arrived too early, something that should not exist yet, because it carries the record of a moment that is still unfolding. Most visitors never see artifacts like this. They pass through the archive without realizing what they were standing beside, without understanding what almost revealed itself to them, without recognizing what was waiting. But you stopped here, which means the artifact recognized you. Objects do not enter the archive randomly. They arrive when someone crosses a threshold their story cannot return from. They arrive when a decision begins forming before it is spoken. They arrive when a truth becomes visible before it is accepted. And sometimes they arrive when someone is about to discover what role they were always meant to play. Pause. This artifact is still being written. That is why it appeared tonight, and that is why it cannot remain hidden anymore. Because once an unfinished artifact enters the archive, it begins revealing itself. Slowly, carefully, exactly when it is supposed to. The next time the archive opens, you will understand what it carries and why it appeared for you first. Return when it does, because something else is already on its way. The archive does not open often, and it never opens by accident. If you are still here now, it means something in your story was meant to reach this moment. Most visitors believe they leave the archive when the message ends, but that is not how this place works. Once a page opens here, it continues writing, quietly, carefully, exactly when it is supposed to. Something you recognized tonight was not new, it was remembered, and once something is remembered inside the archive, it does not disappear again. There are other rooms here, other records, other artifacts that have not revealed themselves yet. Some of them are already moving closer. The next time the archive opens, you will understand why this message appeared tonight and why it appeared for you first. Until then, remain observant, because the archive is still recording what comes next. Return when it calls again. It always does.